Welcome to your awakening. Please remain calm while we program your children. Welcome back, folks. Greetings, well met. Welcome back again. Press the button quick. Press the stop screen sharing button. Hopefully you might have guessed that that's not the usual audio from that video clip. The setup I've got at the moment means I couldn't play the audio back off it, so I thought I'd just vocalize it instead. I was trying to do the kind of noise that an old style modem makes. I don't think I could get it quite right though. Couldn't quite get that high pitched tone, but there you go. I've just remembered, like I usually do at the last minute, just remember the things I forgot to do. But I'll do them while I'm talking. Hopefully I can multitask that much. If I can see this screen that's half a mile away on the other side of the room from me in the current setup I've got. Yes, it is a holy bank day. It's a holy banking day. Are you banking holily? Yeah, are you doing your holy banking? You're supposed to be doing that today because it's a holy banking day. So hopefully you can enjoy the irony of your money being on holiday, supposedly. But whether it truly is, whether the banks actually take a break from stuffing you over and extracting your energy in whatever way they can, that's a completely different question. Maybe a different perception on the whole situation. But here in the UK, it is a bank holiday today, for the just after Easter, the Easter changeover, just after the beginning of the financial new year, all that kind of stuff. But oh no, New Year starts on January the 1st. Even though in the old tradition, it was this time of year, just after the spring equinox, that it would be the beginning of the new year. Remember to mute YouTube page, even though I can't actually hear it from this far away, but just in case it causes any feedback, please let me know in the chat box or whatever if there's any problems with the audio or the video, etc., because I can't check in the way I usually do because of the way I've had to have it set up tonight. Yeah, it's a bank holiday, so I'm dog sitting for my relatives again at the moment. I was last week and I probably will be next week still while they're away on holiday. So I've had to try and jerry rig a setup. I'm not supposed to be smoking in this room, but I'm sure they'll forgive me when they get back. And it'll only be for while I'm doing these broadcasts. So they'll have plenty of time to aerate and I can fumigate the rooms afterwards. But yeah, I've had to have this alternate setup. Hopefully this week, this internet connection, the way I've got it set up now, will hold long enough for me to do broadcast. If there's any problems, then maybe we'll try again next week or Wednesday or something, but we'll see how it goes. It seems to be okay so far. So I'll shut up and get on with it. Hello to everyone in the chat room. Again, because the way they've got their room set up, the TV's up on the wall, all the way over there away from me. So that's why it looks like I'm staring up at the ceiling. Hello, everyone in the chat room. Thanks for joining us. You have a quick scroll down. Storm Aside. Hello. Reality Chat, you in the room. And Dave Iron. Hello, Dave. Lotsum Tatfro. Hello. And Robert Lunn, hello, and James Owen, hello, mate. Hello to you in the chat room at the moment. I'll try and come back to the chat room in a bit and say hello to the people who've turned up after the beginning. Depends how much reach this broadcast has at the moment. We shall see. I know there's been a lot more people tuning in after the live broadcasts as well. So hello to all you time travelers who are watching this at another time in the future. Hello to the future. So I'll put something in the info box, kind of the usual kind of subtitle that I do this week. I have not been able to do much internet viewing over the last week. A little bit. So I've caught a few things. I've seen a little bit of the TV news. While I'm here, I've been able to watch the standard bullshit propaganda channels. So I've seen more of the normal TV news, the normal TV news, rather than any of the more interesting, things that I find interesting anyway, more interesting stuff online, where there's much more scope for choice still, just about, even though those fences are rapidly coming together, as I've been ranting about for a few years now. And we've been talking about how this stuff was coming. It's no longer coming. It is happening. It has been happening for probably the past several months, a year, maybe. But certainly the past few months, it's been pretty obvious that it is happening now. It's not coming. It is happening. It's no longer crazy conspiracy speculation, paranoid people online talking about shit that's never going to happen, mate. Well, it is happening. Now you can see it happening. Now you may very well be experiencing it yourself. It might begin as a couple of weeks on the naughty step on Facebook or something like that. But if you are continuing with your unprescribed or unofficial point of view about whatever it is, just your point of view on life, then you will experience it more and more and more. And it will get worse and worse and worse until you either change what you're doing, what you're saying, or you stop trying to participate in this online environment, because they won't let you. Facebook has now been prescribing the opinions that you are supposed to have. So, I don't want to get drawn into ranting about any particular individuals or cases or the usual names that have been paraded around, other than to say, similar to what I've said before, quite a few, if not all, but the vast majority of these individuals that get paraded to us as being the examples of how they're getting censored, and these are the people being cracked down upon, etc. They're censoring so-and-so's free speech because he talks about certain topics. They're there deliberately to create a narrative to justify this whole situation and to persuade the general populace that this is the way it will be. So just shut up, keep your head down, and get on with what we're telling you to do. So the majority of them, I don't want to say it in a way that makes it sound like I'm trying to either defend them or suggest to others that they should be defending them, because a lot of them do put out a hell of a lot of shit. So the less shit being pumped at people, the better. So if they happen to, not be able to push their shit as far as usual, I'm okay with that in general. Just not when it comes to the point of free speech. Then it should be they have the opportunity, and then the public is left to decide whether they want to listen or not. Not somebody else prescribing that they are or are not allowed to speak because the authority decides they're not allowed to. No. Allow them to speak and let the public decide whether they want to listen to it or not. The public can walk away if they choose to. That is free speech. But we will see as things progress over this coming year. It's going to get more and more obvious. It's going to become a standard. It's going to become the uniformity that they want people to accept. That little sort of rant brings me back around to why I put the subtitle the way I did. Virtual non-existence in a corresponding creation. Let me just look back at it, make sure I'm saying that the same way that I actually wrote it. Just to make sure. Virtual non-existence in a corresponding creation. Because the way I scribbled it down in my notes, it's not quite the same as that. I just put the 2 points in. virtual non-existence, corresponding creation. Yeah. I didn't actually put it into a good English grammar sentence or whatever, because it's just my notes, so it don't matter. But I wanted to check to make sure that I'd got the point correct in the way I was saying it. Virtual non-existence. So if it's virtual, it doesn't exist. It's not actual. You got virtual and actual. Virtual doesn't really exist. It can exist in the mind. It can exist in the imagination. You know, you can virtually create something, but that means you don't actually create it. If it's actual, then it's in reality. It is existent. So virtual is pretty much the same as saying non-existent or non-existence. So a lot of what's been going on for a few years now and building up into this year is this drawing people into a virtual existence is the way they describe it, but it's not existence because it doesn't really exist. There is nothing there. There's just a movement of energy representing something. So it's like shifting sand. It's like a etch-a-sketch machine. You can create an image, but the image isn't really there because it requires you constantly creating it to sustain it. As soon as you turn that power off or shake the etch-a-sketch, it's gone. Doesn't exist anymore. You turn all the computers off and all your virtual existence is now non-existent. It's gone. I know pedantically we could argue over storage material, magnetic media storage, whatever, yeah, that can retain the information for a not infinite length of time, but for a fair amount of time. And if you keep refreshing and updating and copying, then potentially for as long as people keep that job going, it will exist. But as soon as you stop perpetuating that job, it's gone. The same as culture. Culture only exists because it is the things that we repeat. We pass from one generation to the next, and the next generation picks it up and carries it forward to the next and the next. So culture only exists because we repeat it, we sustain it, we keep it going, we pass it on. The virtual existence is the same thing. As soon as people stop putting any energy into it, it disappears like a phantom, like a fart in the wind. It's gone. But this is a lot of what they're trying to draw people into now, to have more belief in what goes on in a fictitious world where, yeah, it's great because anything's possible and you can be whatever you want within that fantasy world, that fictitious world, but it is non-existent. It's not real. It's not reality. And the reason I worded it in such a way as a corresponding creation, this is something that I'll try and get into it in a bit. I'll explain further as I go on, but just to try and give an encapsulation of what I'm trying to say with that. In reality, in the natural world around you, in your own existence, you can see an element of what is referred to as correspondence. In other words, like duality, there is a reflection. Like two mirrors facing each other, there is a reflection, one to the other. So there is the self, and then there is the everything else, the collective, the outside world, the inside world. And I'm sure you can extrapolate all the other forms of duality that you want from that, you know, the black and white and all that usual kind of example. But everything has a corresponding opposite. They're not always equal. Sometimes one is much greater than the other, you know, in terms of its presence or its power, its ability, whatever. But they don't necessarily need to be equal. They just need to accept the fact that both will exist. In the past, I've often ranted from the point of view, I say rant often when I've been talking about stuff. Sometimes I rant. Most of the time I just use that as an excuse. It's like a qualifying language to sort of say, you know, yeah, I might have been preaching a lot, but anyway, yeah, I've ranted before in the past about how if you don't have an enemy, the system will create an enemy for you. because there has to be that balance, there has to be that equilibrium, so that they have a lever to use against you. They can't just leave you alone. There always has to be something that can be used to oppose you. So if you are, for want of a better word to say, if you are so perfect that you have no enemies in the world whatsoever, the system will be forced to create one, so that it can create that Hegelian effect of having something to use against you to create a leverage. There can be no fulcrum point in the middle if there are no two polarities either side to create that equilibrium. One may be greater than the other at any one point in time, but there's still the fact that there are those two polarities with the fulcrum point in the middle that enables leverage. And that's what they need. That's what they rely on in one form or another. The entire system is a structure of levers to enable them to put pressure or a force of energy in a certain direction, so that it moves things in the direction that they want. I've also described it before as spinning plates, and the system is spinning plates, and it puts a certain amount of counterweight on one side so that it causes the plate to turn, and that takes it a certain direction that they want. And another metaphor or analogy to use to describe it is curling. That winter sport where they throw the stones down the ice. Gary and myself were talking about it as well just before we started, because it does make a perfect metaphor for this kind of stuff. They need the guys either side brushing the ice, and by however much pressure is put on one side or the other, that causes the stone to curve one way or the other. The stone is the mass of the energy of the population at large. They want it to go a certain direction, they need to put pressure on one side of that environment to cause it to curve, to oscillate in that direction. So in a corresponding creation, this creation has that element of correspondence within it. If you use your reasoning, that is undeniable. It's everywhere. It permeates throughout everything. So it's there. You can try and deny it as much as you want, but it's there. Doesn't mean it's the answer to everything. It's just part of the way reality works. They need to repeat or to utilize the same structure to get the effect that they want. They want you to be disempowered, no longer able to actually affect reality around you, create an actual effect in reality. So instead, they persuade you to go the opposite direction, into a virtual existence where you get a sense that you are actually doing something, actually, Hartley. You get a sense that you're actually doing something because you have this chemical response, this dopamine feedback response from the majority of, I was going to say the internet structure, but it's not just purely the internet. It's gaming media, it's entertainment media, it's even social media. And in many ways, even in the academic side of things, in that kind of environment, there are structures that feed that desire, need, a feedback loop where they give you little bits of reward, so it keeps you pursuing the same progression or the same pathway, so that it builds a neural net in the direction that they want. So in that corresponding creation, they need to create this other space, this virtualized space. They want you to be, in effect, non-existent in reality, to not be able to actually make any difference in the real world. So they give you this virtualized existence to put all your energy into. It's like draining the energy out of somebody into a bubble that is not able to affect anything around it. So they are isolating and entrapping your energy and giving you the sensation that you're achieving something when really all you're doing is clicking on pixels. Yeah, I've called it pixel jizz. It's that, dopamine effect of like you get to the pixelated orgasm, You've achieved the highest level in the game you're playing, or you've got the latest reward points, or you've got the latest add-on skin for your character in the shoot 'em up game that you're playing, whatever, or you've got the most likes on a Facebook page. This kind of stuff is that reinforcement loop to convince you that what's going on in this electronic, illuminated digital world is somehow reality. And that then convinces your mental structure, because you're building neural pathways in your mind by that reward feedback loop that causes you to constantly go over the same pathways again and again and again. So they become reinforced. So they become part of your neural structure, part of your mind. So there is no outside of that pathway left to you, or there doesn't seem to be. You think there is no other direction to go. None are so blind as those who cannot see. And with your third eye, if you can't see that that effect is occurring to your own thinking process, such that you just keep falling straight into the same ruts, there seems to be no other choice of direction to you, just because it's like the path of least resistance. The electrical chemical pulses going through your brain move along that rut so easily, so perfectly, and you get a rewarding response from the effects that you're presented by this electronic medium. So it gives you a fake sense of accomplishment, a fake completion, almost like say, using a very base analogy, it's like an electronic orgasm. So you get that pixel jizz effect. You blow up the enemy vehicle in the game, and you see all the pixels everywhere, and it's all sparkly like kaleidoscope, like fireworks. It's all whee, and you got chemical fireworks going on in your brain at the same time. Part of my inspiration for thinking and talking about this kind of stuff was I managed to catch some episodes of a TV series, I think it's on Channel 4, called Dead Pixels. And I thought that there's a lot of elements of that are just so spot on. I thought it's quite amusing. It's a good comedy, but just the social commentary of the way the storyline is presented, of the characters being so engrossed into the game world that they play in and stuff like that. It's good social commentary just from that point of view. Unfortunate, but amusing. And also, hopefully, amusing enough to connect with people such that they'll actually start to get the message of how that kind of virtualized existence is non-existence. It's not reality. No matter how good it looks, no matter how convincing the characters are or whatever, it's still not reality. And the same perception should be applied now, certainly, to the majority of social media, or what people call social media, because it's not just the big platforms. There's a lot of other parts of the internet that provide a similar kind of service to social media, but they're presented in a different way. So, it doesn't look like Facebook or Twitter or whatever, but it still has that same feedback effect for people. My influence was partly that, partly stuff in general. As I said earlier, I haven't had the opportunity to look at the internet much this week, so I'm not exactly that caught up on the news. I've seen a few bits, but not a lot. But I did, because being sort of taking time off and being in a situation where I don't have my usual kind of setup to distract myself with, I picked up a book that I have never read properly from cover to cover. I don't know if is that backwards in the view, hopefully not. I've never read it before cover to cover. I've only ever read short excerpts, a paragraph or two that somebody's used as a reference when I've been reading an article or somebody else's work. But I've got myself a hard copy. I've been slowly working on building up my library of hard copy of interesting works. And I sat and read that last week. It's not a very long book. Certainly, I would recommend it to anybody that's interested in the kind of stuff that I'm often talking about, the kind of stuff that I often talk about. I think if you've never looked at anything like it before, it'll probably be quite eye-opening, third eye-opening, hopefully, if you read it with an open mind. But if you are into this kind of stuff as well, it is a very good singular volume to give you the basics kind of thing, because it's talking primarily about Hermeticism, or as they call it, Hermetic philosophy, because it doesn't get into the things like alchemy and magic and that kind of part of historical works that have been attributed to Hermeticism as a academic body kind of thing. But I was quite surprised upon actually reading it from cover to cover. So reading the whole thing. This is a book that was written in 1903, I think, or 1908, something like that. 1908. A book written in 1908 attributed to William Walter Arkinson. Sorry, almost said Atkinson. Arkinson. W.W. Arkinson. It's 144 pages. Do you think there might be some various levels and layers to this volume? Yes, I think there is, but beside the point of what I'm trying to say at the moment, it's a good sort of foundation thing to read if you've been interested in this kind of stuff, but never, if you put off by the sheer volume and the kind of mysticism effect of a lot of Hermeticism, because some of it does verge into magical ideas and realms where it's difficult to truly comprehend a lot of what they're saying, because there's so much amorphous and ambiguous elements to what they're talking about in the text. It's like, well, what are they even saying? Wave the juju stick at the thing, and it becomes like a lot of supposed magic tomes from the past. Yeah, whatever. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, there's a hell of a lot of other good reading material out there for you to dig into. But I've never read this from cover to cover. It's not a difficult book to read at all. I just see you're saying it's not way beyond your pay grade, mate. I'm just reading the chat room a little bit. It's not a difficult to read book at all. It's written for the layman. There's no previous knowledge expected, and it's not filled with weird jargon or anything like that. It's quite simple language used to describe what they're talking about. And the majority of the volume is basically just an explanation of the 7 principles, the 7 main principles. So they give you the 7 main principles, which is what I just marked to read out. But then the rest of the book just gives you like an explanation of what they mean when they talk about that kind of stuff. And the guy who wrote this uses a lot of metaphor and analogy. And when I was reading through it, I was thinking, I've pretty much said exactly the same thing over the last 2 years. I've been talking about the same kind of stuff. But I wasn't doing what I was doing because I read this and thought, first I'm going to do that one, then I'm going to do that one. No, I'd come to information about Hermeticism from a completely different angle. I didn't go and look for books on Hermetics and sit and study just those books and then come and do these broadcasts. A lot of the stuff that he talks about in this, I came to from other directions, from my own conclusions. Things such as correspondence. Over the years, it became more and more obvious to me that there was what in philosophy, in one school of philosophy anyway, can be called the Hegelian dialectic. In dialectics, it's the Hegelian dialectic where you have to have the thesis, antithesis, the two working together create the synthesis, or the two rubbing together, creating friction between them, create the middle ground, the synthesis. But Hermetics goes far beyond just one element of philosophy. It digs into the nature of reality itself and how a comprehension of the operating nature of reality will help you work your way through almost any question or problem or observation, something you're looking at, like we're often doing when we're looking at the media and they're presenting us with a narrative, a storyline, a chunk of information about an event or whatever, and you're given a certain framed perspective that they want you to just accept. And for the questioning mind out there, those that have got to the point that I use the terminology awakening process. Yeah, when they've got to that point of the awakening, when it's like, no, hang on a minute, this is no longer making any good sense to me. I'm starting to have to question what they're showing me, because what they're showing me just stinks like bullshit. Most people call that critical thinking. I think it goes a lot deeper than that, and it's a process of beginning to look for true authority, because you've started to realize that those individuals, groups, and infrastructures that claim authority over you have very little legitimate claim to any such authority. So therefore, you begin a questioning process that you begin looking for, well, what is a true authority? What do you even mean by that? How do I live my life without that structure being there to tell me what to do? You know, like classic kind of pseudo parent of the big nanny state telling you how to live your life and what you can and can't do, that kind of thing. The principles that they go through in this will help you a lot with that. And that was something I learned over the years. It was something that made me change a lot of what I was doing and how I was trying to present it on this channel. And some of that came from my experience with ayahuasca, but also just my general interest in topics such as reading works like this, looking at information like this, Hermetic information as one of them, but others as well, not just Hermeticism. But these principles, I'll read just the 7 principles out. I'm not going to dig into the rest of the book, because they do basically just extrapolate on the principles themselves to try and make them more understandable for people. But number 1, the principle of mentalism. That is that everything in all of creation is mental. And that doesn't mean crazy. You're all mental, and it doesn't mean crazy. No, it means of the mind, not your mind. And there is more to dig into with that, but it's a foundation that explains a hell of a lot of things, or helps to comprehend a lot of the hows and whys of what reality does and our experience of it. Yeah, the principle of mentalism. Number 2, the principle of correspondence. As I sort of mentioned a little bit with my talk about the way they're trying to get people into this virtualized, non-existent world, because they want to remove your energy from affecting the real, physical, actual world. Correspondence. Everything has its opposite. Doesn't always mean they're equal, but there is that balance of the duality, the opposite. Number 3, the principle of vibration. This is something, again, I've often talked about. Everything is in flux. Everything is in movement. You may perceive it as being stationary, but it's not. It's moving in some fashion. Even if it's really, 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 really slow, it's still moving. It's just that to your perception, the way we experience reality, you think it's not moving. It looks like it's not moving. You have no experience of it moving. There's no sensation of it moving, but it is. In the grand scale of things, everything is in motion. Everything is constantly moving. Energy and vibration. Number 4, the principle of polarity, which is similar to correspondence, but not quite. This is just the principle of duality is another way of saying it. There are always 2. There is always this balance, this opposition. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be conflict, but there has to be a polarity to create the movement, or there is a polarity created because there is movement. When the energy oscillates in its vibration, there are 2 extremes, 2 polarities to that oscillation, the high point and the low point. If you look at it as a sine wave, It's the top or the bottom of the sine wave. There is that polarity, the two end points, the two furthest extremes of movement. The principle of rhythm, that's number 5, the principle of rhythm. Things have an ebb and a flow. Again, this is something I've often talked about. Most of the, I've already said that. All of this I have in one way or another talked about. And I've tried to remind people of these underlying foundational principles that will help you work your way through the bullshit. Brush aside the propaganda crap and look at how the narratives are actually affecting society and affecting your life, so that you can hopefully find ways of sidestepping it or changing that flow. Doing a bit of energetic aikido on it and turning it back to your benefit rather than your detriment. Number 5, the principle of rhythm. That also includes our perception of sequential time, where things will occur in a seemingly cyclical nature. That again is like that sine wave rhythm. There is a peak of the sine wave and there is the trough, the valley of the sine wave. And things go through that oscillation process that to us becomes a rhythmical nature of duality. There is day, there is night. The tide comes in, it goes out, etc. That's that rhythm of life. The sun at the moment is going through a cycle of minima, which means its activity is reduced such that its output affects us in a different way. So it's causing changes here on our own planet, in our own environmental experience, in different ways. I've argued for years that it's affecting us psychologically and spiritually as well, which is part of the reason why things are seemingly chaotic, confused, out of step, or radically changing. Part of the reason why there is this massive paradigm change happening is because of the cycle of the sun that's occurring and how it affects us and how it affects the rest of the planet. Rhythm. Number 6, the principle of cause and effect. This is one where, as well, it gets a little bit into the question of free will and determinism, which this book doesn't dig into very much, but it's there as a note. So, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, it's a good point to connect the two. But cause and effect, in the external reality, there is an obvious cause and effect. You prod a lion in the face and he's probably going to eat you. That's just one ridiculously simple metaphor to describe it, but it's pretty obvious there's cause and effect all around us. That cause and effect, this is something I've argued in the past as well, that cause and effect of the external world does not refute or remove free will because of the principle of correspondence. If there is determinism, there has to be free will. And if there is free will, there has to be determinism. The two are correspondent opposites in that oscillating rhythm of vibration. The external is deterministic. What we call physical reality is deterministic. But your energy, your psychological energy, your spiritual energy, the ethereal energy that permeates all of existence is free will. You are not deterministic in your own self. Your true self has the ability of free will choice, such that you can affect the deterministic outcomes of the physical reality. So by how I choose to hit the cue ball on the snooker table or on the pool table affects the direction that shot, that cue ball takes, which affects the result of the shot I'm trying to make, etc., by my free will choice of how I decide to take that shot. So my free will choices inside here can affect the physical reality outside. That's the correspondence that means the two are both existent. It's not one or the other, it's both and. And in a similar fashion, the last one, number 7, the principle of gender. That's at the moment I thought it was again worthwhile mentioning this because it's quite an appropriate thing to mention at the moment. The principle of gender. And it's not talking about LGBTQ stuff. This is about how, in reality, by observation, you can see how those two opposites that are required by at least three of the principles, one seems to perform one part of the job required, and the opposite performs the other part of the job required. So to use human beings as a simple analogy to represent that, the male provides one part of the equation, the female takes that part and gestates it, and it becomes the whole of the result, the answer to the equation. So it takes the two working together. One provides one element that's required, the other one provides the other element that's required to create the third, the result. The magic of three. So gender, as in masculine and feminine, as like we're often talking about on these shows, talking about the masculine and feminine energy, it does not necessarily have, well, really it has nothing to do with all this modern intersectional bullshit, modern feminism and LGBT stuff. It's nothing to do with that. This is just the simple observation that in reality, those two opposites are required, and each side provides an element that the other one can't. So the woman doesn't have a penis and testicles to provide herself with the semen required to gestate the egg that she already has, and vice versa with the male. He doesn't have a uterus that's producing eggs that he can mix with his own semen. One has one, the other side has the other. The two are required to work together to create the third. And all of nature, all of reality is like that, in many different ways and many different levels. One of the other parts of how you might find that work helpful is it helps consolidate that kind of perception, such that it's not just like, oh, here's 7 principles, run around with them and figure it out for yourself. It puts it together in such a way and gives enough examples and suggestions of how to look at that perspective for you to fit them all together and see how they are all working together. They're not conflicting with each other, and one benefits from the others being there at the same time. They all correspond with each other. So, like I say, it does provide a good foundational point of view if you've never studied anything to do with Hermeticism or some of the way they look at reality. I say they look at like there's some separate people. It's not. It's a school of thought, if anything. I can't think of a better way to describe it. It is a toolbox of reasoning and experience and observation that has been performed throughout history, because this stuff goes back to before written history. This stuff precedes, some of it certainly precedes all of the religions and the mystery schools included. The mystery schools carried some of this information. It gets piled on with a lot of the other stuff to do with like magic and whatever, and how to influence the energy of creation in reality, stuff like that. But it's still based on the same principles that are expressed through Hermeticism. And I didn't get the chance to look up who it was who posted a comment under one of my videos a few weeks ago. It might have been several weeks ago now. But they suggested another book that was a good starter book for people if they're interested in Hermeticism. I'll try and dig that out for next time and check it out. But that The Kybalion was a book that's been in my digital folder for a number of years. I've never got around to actually reading the ebook version of it that I've had on my computer for years. But when I had the opportunity recently, since my finances were back on track, I thought, no, it's another one I want to stick on my bookshelf, so I'll get a decent copy of it. And chatting with other people recently online, at one point we were talking about it, and I just thought, yeah, I've forgotten about that one. I want to get hold of that and sit and read that at some point. So I did with this opportunity over the last week. And I wanted to mention it because I thought it was quite appropriate how information from many thousands of years ago, at least, probably tens of thousands potentially, some elements of it tens of thousands of years old, is still around and still makes perfectly good sense because it adds up. The equation works. Yeah, it matches observation, and many people have gone over it again and again and again and not found fault with it. It keeps giving good results every time. It's one of those things that seems to be a major core of what's been going on for the past few years in this environment. There is this new environment being built, this new paradigm that the system is trying to shuffle people into. And they want you to forget about all this old information. It's all old world, so it's meaningless, man. No, the world's a computer simulation, don't you know, yeah? They've got to put the same ideas into contemporary parlance. But what they're doing is disguising the beneficial information that's contained in that ancient knowledge into something glib and meaningless or misdirecting. So now people are obsessed with talking about whether this is a computer simulation and who is it who built the computer and when are we going to get computers fast enough to give us the same kind of level of simulation, and where's my VR glasses? I want to play my 3D porn game. So they're missing the whole fucking point completely. They're not applying it to their reality. They're just looking for another escapism, another virtual existence or non-existence, as I've explained. So I thought it's worth mentioning it because it's, like I say, it's not a very long book. It's not difficult to read. There's no, over-the-top jargon or in-depth stuff in it that you need 10 degrees to be able to comprehend, or not at all. Completely the opposite. It's well written, a little bit poetic in its use of language sometimes, but other than that, it's easy to read stuff. And if you thought the kind of stuff I've been talking about for the past few years has caught your attention, then a lot of what's in that book is basically the same as most of what I've been talking about for years now. A lot of the things I try to help people reconnect with are those undeniable observations about how reality works, such that you can use them reliably as foundation stones to stand on when trying to deal with the chaotic and confusing information that is currently being presented to you by the system. Because the system wants you to be confused so that they can keep you in a situation of seeming chaos. Because if you feel that it's chaos, they know it isn't. They're the ones creating the chaos, so they have the ability to ride over the top of it. But you will be lost in the chaos, which means they'll be able to claim some kind of authority over you. If you can't see what they're trying to do, then they can steer you blindly in whatever direction they want. So just those simple principles, if you sit and think about them, cogitate on them, apply them in your observations. I know I'm asking you to do things such as thinking. It's not watching. That's not, talking. That's not clicking buttons and getting a rush from having the likes clicked on your video or on your Facebook post or whatever. No, I'm asking you to spend some time thinking about stuff. When you're going about your day to day, make your own little observation, watch something going on in the world around you, whether it be what people do or what the natural world does, and try applying some of those observations and see how they can be used to explain or to create comprehension about the mechanisms of what you're observing. The correspondence, the polarity, the rhythm, all those things, all things in flux, the vibration, all those principles you can see in your daily life. You may think it's something, all this highfalutin philosophical stuff, mate. It's not. They're applicable to everyday life. And they're the kind of things that are a basis that can be used in what would be called hard sciences. The basics of mathematics, geometry, stuff that is applicable to hard science all come from the same kind of basic observations, cause and effect. If that Newtonian cradle, if I pull that ball up and let it go, it hits the others and the other one bounces a bit. That's that Newton's cradle. Yeah, it's cause and effect. There's one of those observations in motion for you to use. The next step is taking that kind of perception or ability to observe and apply those principles such that you can make a conclusion or a prediction of the unrunning process of linear time. So in other words, you can look into the future and predict where something is going to end up at. That's all I've been doing for years now. I look at the output that the system pumps at us, and I see these rhythmical patterns of behavior. And it's like a call and response. They say, we didn't do it. And then you see the evidence come out a few years later that says, yes, they did. So when they say, we didn't do it, you know that sooner or later, within a few years, the evidence will come out that shows, yes, they did. So sooner or later, after seeing that same pattern repeat several times, you have to go, that's a rhythm. That's an innate rhythm that is created by the way the system does what it does. The system requires those things to occur, because if they didn't, they would have stopped doing them, but they don't. It's perpetual. So that is what the system is doing. When they come on the TV and say, oh, we didn't do it, folks, it wasn't us, we're innocent, you know, they've done something. They've done probably exactly what they claim they haven't done. You know, when they tell us that they're not starting a war in a different country, or that they're going in to save the people of that country, you know, they're having to intervade to rescue the people and bring democracy to them. They say they're bringing democracy, but they're actually bringing tyranny. You know, and you see those patterns again and again and again, that rhythm of how they utilize, utilizing the energy to create a result, to affect the deterministic external reality through their own will. And the reason I've talked about this kind of stuff now for years is to try and help people go through that process of realignment. This is nothing to do with religion. This is to do with your energy and how your energy flows into this reality. When you are turned in on yourself, which is what the system primarily wants to do to the vast majority of people. They want you to be turned in on yourself and to be a receiver only. You're not a transmitter. You're not allowed to fully utilize your being, because your being is a transceiver. You are both. You're a transmitter and a receiver working together. Remember, I talked about the two opposites required. But they don't want you to be transmitting, because an entire world full of people transmitting would be way beyond their control. Way beyond their control. Yeah, they can't keep a lid on that. They can't stay in power. They can't stay sat on top of that pyramid if everybody's transmitting. So they want you to be a receiver, and they want you to receive their output and clone yourself after their output. This is why I've banged on so much, pun intended. This is why I banged on so much about music and rhythm and tone, because this is a lot of what they do. They project a vibratory energy that they expect people to replicate. Yeah, you are a receiver that receiving like a tuning fork. You receive a vibration from the outside and you start vibrating at the same rate. So you create yourself into a clone of what they project. And you, in that sense, are no longer a threat to them, because the information, the projection that they're giving out to you is one that they've already created to be certain will never be a threat to them. So they want you to think you are these certain archetypal clones, you know, even down to somebody who may think they're a bit of a rebel. And I've lived through this phase through my life, and I'm quite happy to say that I'm probably still going through it to a certain degree. Maybe I've just got a chink of light out of that box to help me realize that I've been playing the part of an archetypal rebel that they presented to me when I was a kid. But I've done that. I've made that chink in that box such that I can see beyond it, and I can see that this is a repetition of an output that they're giving to me. But if you actualize, I know it's a bit cheesy in many ways, I'm using a lot of key phrases, or people will say, I'm in on it, I'm in on the narrative because I'm just throwing out key phrases. But if you actualize your whole being, you are not just a receiver, you are a transmitter as well. Yeah, so in this reality, you are meant to be participating in this reality. That doesn't mean sitting back, letting them pump stuff into you and then just cloning yourself after whatever they tell you. No, it means you're supposed to use your own thinking, your own spiritual energy, your own whole being to be participating in this reality. So that means transmitting as well as receiving. That generative force is the force of all creation. That's the true emanation of all creation. That energy, that generative energy. I can even say it. It's hard to say that word without my teeth in. And even though I'm well aware that people will often talk about entropy at this point, they'll usually throw that in, thinking that it's some kind of touche, entropy. You can't have forever generation creation because entropy. And again, I'll say it's that rhythm. If entropy was all the big shit, mate, then the world, the whole universe wouldn't be in existence at all at the moment, would it? Because if entropy is the big shit, if everything is entropy, then surely the entire universe would have died out billions of years ago. If entropy is the be all and end all. It's not, it's both combined. There is a constant energy of creation, like a fountain head, constantly, that like a fountain head comes out, projects out, and then entropy takes it back down again. And we end up with that toroidal energy field. It's projected out by the fountainhead, comes back round, and the correspondence element, the opposite, the dualistic opposite of that outward projection is a receiver. So entropy brings everything back in again. It's transformed, in flux, forever in transformation, projected again newly. So the one thing that is absolutely there constantly is that element of the generative force. There is this energy that is constantly causing physical reality to create stuff. Yeah, we don't fully comprehend exactly how everything is created yet. Scientists have been arguing over that kind of stuff for forever, and they're going to keep on arguing over the finer details of how stuff works. But the absolute is that there is that level of energy that creates, that provides the material, for want of a better word. It's not physical, but just the energy that allows stuff to be created. That is always there. Go on, mate. I know you want to jump in.
I trace this back to the point where they say in the Bible that in the beginning there was chaos. And I've seen people like Jordan Peterson talking about the chaos as a bad thing. And then, like, you get these higher planes of reality where you have God, which created everything, and it was pure potential. But that is chaos. That pure potential is completely unordered. It is chaos.
Yeah.
And so instead of getting order out of chaos, what you get is you get coact out of chaos. Coaction. Because chaos is God with all his potential and nobody else. Once there's somebody who recognizes God, it's a coaction, it's a co-creation out of chaos. And that shows that anarchy is the true religion politics. Because
yes, I'd agree with you.
Of God's total potential. Anything can happen kind of thing. Yeah?
And it's spot on, and definitely agree with you. And it gives me as well a good stepping stone to mention the one other thing I wanted to mention tonight, and then I'll shut up with my usual rambling. But a cliched point that is often being thrown around in this environment at the moment is about the firmament. And it's a point that keeps coming up again and again and again because it's part of a certain psyop agenda narrative that's been playing out for a few years now. But it was just something that was going through my head while I was reading it and thinking about Hermeticism and the root of the word Hermeticism. You know, supposedly it's attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, and that's where the Hermetics, etc. comes from. But it had me thinking about its etymological root connections to something such as firmament, Fermi, because it's a similar root connection coming out of the Latin, Greek and the Latin. And so I think I was thinking about it, I think, well, firm means something strong or buttressed or secure. It can also be interpreted in a way that it represents something that is closed. So like a strongly, securely closed box or safe can be considered firm. Yeah, or he was firm in his point of view. He gave a firm response, etc. These are things where the word implies that there is no other around or getting away from the whatever it is that's been done. You know, he's firm about his point of view. In other words, there is no variation. It's this or nothing else. And that just left me thinking what firmament meant, obviously, is of the mind, of the mental. So firmament basically just implies strong mind. So when the Hermetics and the Gnostics were talking about the firmament and the idea of there being this gradation of reality beyond the earth, the foolish took that to mean that there was some kind of dome, you know, some kind of solidness, like a glass dome over the world. And it's like, that's not what it means at all. It means strong mind, of strong order, strong will. So when the creator God is talking about, and I set the firmament for you, in other words, he's saying this order will be your dominant order of mind. Doesn't mean there's nothing beyond it. It's just saying this is where your mind is strongest. So we're here having our experience of this environment, the experience of mankind, and it's being presented by this creator God that is, you know, giving this impression in the storyline that I'm giving this to you. This is where you will exist. This is your life. So in other words, it's the same as him saying, this is the order you will follow. This is the stratified structure that you are part of. And the firmament implies that you understand, you comprehend that you are in this one part of this interconnected infrastructure. And you have to feel that in yourself, because it is a strong order. There is no denying it. There is no getting away from it, because everywhere you look, it's all around you. And those observations can be confirmed using your own reasoning. So do you see what I mean? There is no outside of that mentality, that box that is the firmament. It doesn't mean there is a fucking glass dome over everything. Does that make sense?
Oh. Yes, it does, Cookie. Yes, I understand.
I thought I'd lost connection. I thought that was going to be typical. I lost connection.
No. I thought as well with hermetic meaning seal as well. It's like
yes,
seal. So
again, why do you need hermetically sealed things? To make sure that nothing escapes, nothing moves between the barrier. Yeah, so you're creating a secure definition. So if you draw a box and say, put something inside that box, and you say, this is my definition inside this box, and it's hermetically sealed, that means nothing can come into to infect whatever it is that you put inside the box. So you're making it secure. Yeah, do you see what I mean? Yeah. So also, I think that was what got me thinking about the etymological connections between Hermes and Fermi, because of the spelling of firmament.
Yeah, interesting. It's like also I put down here because it's like when you said about ancient knowledge, that's what they always say, ancient, but it's just knowledge that's being passed down. I mean, when they say ancient, like to dismiss it, as you said before, to dilute it and to turn it into nonsense, when it's quite obviously not, because that book there, Kybalion, they say, was it 1908? I've heard of it myself. I remember someone saying that's where, well, again, it's just ancient knowledge passed through, isn't it? Through someone else's work, through someone else's, and someone else presenting it, just like you have in the modern day now, with other people doing the same thing, and people like David Icke, for instance, come to mind. They're just passing down knowledge that they've just gone researched, passed through, looked at books like that themselves, I'm sure.
Yeah,
and,
a lot of what Icke talks about is Hermetic tradition.
Yeah, so it's just passing it down. It's good because it needs to be passed down. That's the whole point. It's knowledge, and people need to know this knowledge. And as we've seen over the last good few years now, people are getting more access to this type of knowledge, and to think and to critically think. And like you say, thinking should, it's like it's been banned. Not allowed to think. And the rhythm thing was interesting. Like they throw the rhythm bombs in. It's like they'll try and they'll do everything they can to disrupt your energy and all sorts of ways, mental and physical. So
some of it as well is required, like a right step is followed from a left step, or a left after a right. Yeah, they do it to keep the rhythm going. So if something doesn't occur naturally to create or to perpetuate the rhythm that they want to keep going, so for example, if they want the crowd to move in a certain direction, and only one thing occurs, and then nothing else naturally or organically occurs in the way that they want, they have to create another effect, to give the opposite balance. This is why we see counter groups pop up, and why, like I said for years, if you don't have an enemy, they will create one for you. So sometimes they deliberately just do stuff because they need that stuff to happen for their narrative to keep flowing forward.
Panic stations is something they're really keen on, getting people in a state of panic. And Greta is the number one example of that. She goes to the UN or whatever and says to everybody, "I want you to panic like the house is on fire." I mean, this is what they want. They're trying to generate excitement, which obviously, but once you see the people online, they sound like they're all panicking. They're all, because they're all in that virtual world. And that reminded me of what you were saying about the Hermeticism, which is, at one point, it was called natural philosophy.
Yep.
Because it was things that you could not only know as philosophy, but you could measure it and see it in the world around you.
Yeah.
Whereas for many hundreds of years, after Bacon, a lot of philosophy did enter that virtual world. It was all about ideas, which were very much distanced from real life. Yeah.
And people like Bacon and Newton were very well aware of Hermeticism. They were well aware of things like alchemy and stuff like that. They knew about these ancient traditions, but they just, sidelined most of the information or kept it separate. There's, I can't remember what page it's on, but there's a little bit where he talks about how when this information is abused, it leads to the creation of things such as priesthoods, where the knowledge, the information, the perception that's aided by these principles is secluded and isolated, so that they can create a hierarchy, a power differential between those who don't have the knowledge. Whereas true Hermeticism should be shared to any that want it, any that are able to comprehend it without squandering it on idiots, is basically the nice way of describing it. But if people want to know, they should be able to have access to the knowledge to find out. It shouldn't be secluded behind an academic paywall, or the equivalent of like a priesthood where only the initiates are allowed to look at these books and shit like that. No, this is stuff that's meant for everyone because it helps everyone.
It was meant for everybody back in ancient Greece. A lot of people have forgotten that all of those Greek philosophy books were actually once a transcription of people orating, people speaking and arguing and discoursing in public. And people wrote their words. So, but people often forget that. The philosophy is something. The actual philosophy that we read was a part of what they call them, the trivium. Yeah, which is sort of mathematics, isn't it? Geometry and
grammar, logic, rhetoric.
Rhetoric.
Yeah.
So it was all rhetoric. It wasn't, sitting in a, quiet room thinking about all these thoughts. It was to be discussed in the open.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was rhetoric. Most of the
Yeah.
philosophy that is now passed off as the Greek philosophy books. Yeah.
As a sort of connected point into that, I noticed, was it Colin asking in the chat, I think, how do you know what you read in a book is original? That could be applied to anything and everything, right? Unless you hear it firsthand or you witness it firsthand, etc. And it's a lame, pedantic point that many people often use to try and just dismiss whatever is said. So in other words, it's like, oh, anybody could have printed that, mate. Oh, anybody could have said that, mate. It's the equivalent of fuck off, I don't want to know. If you're really that concerned about the genuineness of what you're reading, then it does require you to put in the effort to do some cross-reference research and stuff like that to find out what's the most original text, who was it translated by, where was it found, what's the provenance of those findings, those chunks of archaeological evidence, stuff like whatever. But that is, it's not an argument or even a rebuttal. I'm trying to think of the word. And it's not even a rebuttal to say, look, well, you can't trust what's printed in a book. It's not a good argument to use against, just because I'm talking about, oh, hey, folks, I read this book and I found a lot of great stuff out of reading what's in this book. To turn around and say, well, how do you know it's original? Fuck off. That is a pathetic argument. I'm sorry, but the easiest way to answer it is just fuck off. If you're going to try and use arguments like that, don't bother. That's not an argument. That's just that I don't want to know. So if you don't want to know, you don't want to know. Fair enough. Yeah. But don't try and present that as some kind of way of refuting the information, because it's not at all. If anything, I don't know if it's just specific to that printing, but they're quite upfront in the introduction when they say things like, this book is attributed to an author, it just says the three initiates. And that's sort of like, well, who the fuck's that? But the people doing the introduction, I don't know who the guy is, but they'd obviously done research into it. And they said the most they can trace it to is it was more than likely written by this one guy. And he's not just writing his own point of view, he's referencing works of other people. Yeah, so they've done the research and pursued that kind of question. But please don't just poo-poo any book just because it's a book. That's the same, doing the same with the newspaper. Newspapers are easier to question in a more serious fashion. But please don't just ignore stuff because you're like, oh, well, I can't trust it because I don't know who printed it. Find out who printed it. Find out who originally wrote it, stuff like that. Yeah? If we distrust everything, then all we do is hamper ourselves. Begin from the points that you feel you can trust and work your way outwards and build trust from going outwards like that. I agree with you on questioning where your information is coming from, but don't just dismiss it offhand with that kind of point of view. It doesn't work well for yourself.
Yeah, but it's that thing of keeping you away from thinking, isn't it? That's what they want to do a lot of the time, get you from, shut you down from doing more, looking into things, more research, more, because and then we also take the word of the system as being correct sometimes as well, which is misleading, or the books that are written by academia, for instance, through history, things like this. So there's a lot of stuff you have to go and work out for yourself as well, isn't there? It's an ongoing sort of thing.
Yeah, you have to go.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say you have to go through your own process.
Yeah, your own process.
Everybody has a subjective point of view of their own experience, and their own experience will colour their perception of what they're looking at. So you have to go through your own process. Somebody else can't do it for you. So, you've got to ask those kind of questions for yourself. And as an example of what you were saying about the textbooks, the Extinction Rebellion again is a brilliant example of that stuff now. I think I ranted this last week. You know, the kids in school have a teacher stood at the front of their class who's teaching them propaganda as if it's truth. And it's even printed in the textbooks that they're being taught from. So when these kids are coming out and, you know, complaining to their parents or harassing their parents saying, oh, you know, Dad, Mum, we've got to do something because the world's going to end. I'm so terrified. They are changing their own lives, or they're putting themselves in immense stress because they've been convinced by a piece of propaganda that has been encoded into pseudo-truth because it's been printed in a book that comes with a stamp of authority on it.
Yeah.
Whereas the stuff in here, you can prove to yourself in your own personal observations, in your own life, with no outside authority required to tell you what is and what isn't. You can read this, use the principles, like I said, apply them to your own observations of reality and your own experiences, and they will prove themselves true to you.
Yeah.
No teacher at the head of the class saying, repeat what it says here. Repeat what it says here. No, none of that shit.
But now
Sorry.
well, I was going to say they've ramped it up another notch with the UN now saying today that humans are threatening 1 million species to extinction. So that's another, you know, off the back of Extinction Rebellion. Now we have the UN today, and that's gone right across the sort of, you know, the globe or in the mainstream. You know, various animals, insects, and the biodiversity, the impact it's going to have on nature, everything. You know, it's you know, that's the big news today. So things that we've known for a while. I mean, let's not mention the corporations, Monsanto, others, GM, others that have poisoned and led the way to causing this damage. I have to say, you know, with their, you know, and now we have the humans threaten. You know, we are to blame. We have caused this, and it's the same with the pollution, the plastics as well. You know, they've said this before. You know, the corporations are the one who are producing this shit. You know, to package their crap, so we'll buy it, and then all of a sudden, you know, we have a problem with lots of pollution and plastics and other stuff. So it's just it's sort of, you know, psychological warfare going on, you know, all the time with us. You know, so this is another example of it now.
I saw a petition today online. I think it was 29,000 scientists are asking for like a halt 5G rollout. Yeah, because of health concerns. It was in a scientific blog. Yeah, with I can't remember the name of it, with the psi sign on top. Yeah, so it looked pretty official. And again, you know, 5G. There was a video I shared last week where a guy in Holland, in The Hague, in fact, they had the mainstream news report. These birds are just dropping out the trees overnight. Yeah, so this guy goes over there with his 5G reader, and he can't read anything. But you know, I mean, it was only for a short period that the birds were dropping out the trees. Yeah, and what else could it be? You know, they ruled out poison. They ruled out pretty much everything else. So they were testing 5G, yeah, or some form of some form of weaponized frequency, and it was killing the birds. So now there's, you know, thousands of scientists calling for 5G stop. And then there's a story we'll deal with properly on Wednesday. Yeah, the Hawaii thing.
Yeah,
the Hawaii, it goes a lot deeper than just some guy leaking something out of the Prime Minister's office. Yeah, it goes all the way back to Cameron and like billions invested in Chinese English trading. A lot of the English cyber security is, you know, it contains little pieces of Hawaii hardware that were put in by Hawaii employees like 6-7 years ago.
yeah.
And do you remember it was oh man, what year was it? Well, it was several years ago, or at least 5 years ago, I think. The head of Chinese cyber security coming visiting here, because I can remember we did talk about it on a Wednesday night, I think. Because 1 month there was that guy, the head of cybersecurity, and then the next month there was one of the other major heads of the Chinese administration came over visiting, and then the news media cycle was more obsessed with us making agreements with them to build more nuclear power plants. But to me, the most important news about that was the cybersecurity guy coming over to help them. I can remember them talking about they wanted his advice and opinion on how they set up what they call the Chinese firewall. So in other words, how they built the infrastructure to create that social credit system that they use in China.
Well, for Wednesday, I'll look up. I saw another thing on Twitter about somewhere in Australia. It wasn't Melbourne; it was smaller than that. But they've introduced the Chinese social crediting scheme in Australia. Yeah, in a town in Australia. So I'll look that up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they are in effect already introducing it here, but they're doing it in more subtle ways, sort of like not so much by the back door, but by the side door. So that they're introducing it in little baby steps in a way that people don't see it as being social credit in control. But in effect, that's already here. What happens if you get a Facebook ban? Do you think that Facebook ban is registered as like a part of your criminal record? In a way, it is. If you get given some kind of electronic ASBO, then it definitely is. The police will keep a record of it if you're banned from going online, stuff like that. But if you're just getting a Facebook ban, Facebook keeps a record of that, and the government can access those records whenever they want. So they are, in effect, already building up the data set required. They are already acting on what is the equivalent of a social crediting system without making it obvious or calling it for what it is or displaying it publicly in that kind of fashion. You don't yet have like a score next to your avatar that says, government points, how many government points have you got? It's not like that, but there is a footprint of you and your information and your activity online, which equates to that. It equates to a value score as a citizen. So they can already utilize it in effect.
One thing I wanted to say, when you was talking about where your energy flows and don't put it into the system, I remember when I was on the old Get Out of Debt Free site, there was some guy on the Quat Loser site. And this is a guy who used to be a tax lawyer, and he's pretty much paid to go out there and debunk people doing free man stuff because it's costing the industry a lot of money. So, probably a lot of the big companies have had a whip round and they've employed this guy. So I go onto this site and it is just the most negative people. I was reading it for about half an hour and I literally had to turn away from the screen. I was almost crying with the misery that is embedded in these people. They are just such horrible fucking people. And I thought, well, yeah, okay, I exposed one of them because I found his address and doxed him because he was trolling somebody. But after that, I thought, just don't visit a place like that. Yeah, I mean, how do things make you feel? And it's the same with the mainstream news. Yeah, I mean, just sitting down and watching it, if it makes you feel bad, don't do it.
Yeah. Counterbalance it. Correspondence. When you start feeling that it's fucking up your own life or dragging you down into a black hole of depression or whatever, stop it. Go and do something else. Go and get out into nature for a bit and, in effect, wash your spirit clean of all that shitty energy that they're trying to pollute you with.
Yeah. One other thing I'll say is I was listening to a guy talking about Ouspensky the other day, and people were talking about feeling like you're imprisoned. And I remember, before I took acid, I would literally have a blinder come down. Actually, it's like, in some ways, it's like we're born with a chloroform mask over our face. And if you want to stay conscious, you've literally got to physically hold that chloroform away so you don't keep falling asleep. And then I did acid for the first time, and time wasn't in prison walls of 4 seconds anymore. Those walls are all broken down. Time was just endless. Yeah, and you don't realise what a prison time can be. Yeah, people think of a prison cell. Yeah, well, if you could only get out of the cell, but so what? If you've got an attention span that can only take 6 paces, you might as well be in a cell your whole life, even if you're free, because you only ever walk 6 paces before you refresh. So you might as well be in a prison because you're in a prison of time. Yeah. So you can knock down those walls of time one at a time, just by catching yourself, ending one, beginning the next. Yeah.
No, was that a pun intended deliberately?
Yeah.
Because as soon as you said it, you can knock them down one at a time. And I was thinking, oh, well, hang on, if there's no time, you can knock them down all at once. They all go all at once. As soon as you step out of that concept of time, they're all gone.
Yeah, if you take magic mushrooms, yeah. But otherwise, when you're focused on something, and that's what the media give. They give you the easy option. They give you, we can shorten your time span just by pushing this button. Oh, that thing you was looking for, here it is. Wait no longer. Yeah, everything's now.
Yeah,
it's
convenient.
Well, we're born into like a heavy, dense energy, aren't we? This grounded energy. We're on the ground, in that sense. So it's that sort of discovering other things, isn't it? And working out, like you talked about tonight. All that stuff.
You're forever stuck to this spinning ball.
So, and then you can, like I say, that's the information you've mentioned tonight. That's the knowledge. I call it ancient knowledge. No, knowledge. Go and find it out, or have a look at it, or like I say, it's all relevant today. It's all part of this. I don't know, these thousands and thousands and thousands of years we've been here, more probably millions. I don't know, but we're going back a long, long way, and this information and all this stuff has been around longer than they let you know. That's why they're trying to hide the timelines of history over the recent years. That's why they do that. That's why they don't want to talk about ancient discoveries that blow apart their bullshit fucking history timeline.
Do you remember the motorcycle manufacturers from the 1930s? You don't, do you?
No.
Because you weren't around at that time, so that contemporary information is no longer relevant to you now because it was contemporary back then. I mean, yeah. In the same way, you don't know about, or they don't want you to know about stuff that happened back then, because that would allow your mind to expand outside of those time barriers, like Goethe was talking about. Yeah, they keep you in a narrow set of possibility. Then that means their work is not impossible, because they would have to account for all other potentialities if you expand those boundaries. Give yourself a narrow boundary and you can list how many potentialities you have to account for. So they want us to be convinced that history is only 6,000 years old, because then they only have to fill in 6,000 years worth of history books. If they told us the truth that it's like way beyond that, then we'd be asking questions. Well, what was before that? What was before that? And we'd be like little kids asking why all the time. And they want us to follow a prescribed order. So they give us this narrow set to work with, so that then they don't have to, like I say, account for every potentiality or cover for every potentiality.
Yeah, because one of those unpleasant facts for them to think about is, what happened before the age of Chaldea and the big empires, when finally people doing agriculture had created enough of a surplus and populations were getting just dense enough that people actually started fighting. Because for tens of thousands of years before that, people were just scratching a living, doing agriculture and trading. If you see somebody else, wow, they might have something we don't have. Yeah, but they want to start in the age of where people are fighting and there are empires. There was nothing before that sort of thing.
There's some evidence that it's blah, 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 blah. You could say it's speculative, but there's some evidence that farming on an immense scale was taking place before the rise of the tradition, or the traditional beginnings of the great empires started to supposedly figure out agriculture. There's some I was going to say archaeological, but it's more when they do like the radar imaging and stuff like that, it's that kind of modern satellite imagery evidence rather than being archaeological. But there's some bits where it looks like there has been agriculture on a scale that even it competes with what we do now with the massive monoculture, big agri-business shit. Yeah, you're talking growing crops on a scale that is meant to feed millions of people at a time. Now, if the history that they tell us is true, that there were no major civilizations where you would have a city with 1 million people in it, before a certain point in time, then why the fuck were they growing so many crops? That doesn't add up. To me, I don't believe that the civilization stuff started 7,000, 6,000 years ago, and when they suddenly figured out agriculture. No, I don't buy it.
No. Anyway, Cookie, I'm gonna have to do one. Sorry to drop out. But, I'll see you all on Wednesday on the reality chat. So
all right.
I'll see you then. So all the best.
I might have it set up in here, but if I'm back in the other room, I'll join in with just audio, mate, in case I'm dropping out. But I will try and be there.
No worries. All right. Thanks for tonight. Anyway, thanks all, and hello to everyone in the chat. And yeah, see you on Wednesday. Good night, guys.
Cheers, man.
Take it easy. 5 minutes.
All right. Okay. Well, I will wrap it up shortly then. I thought it might be a shorter one tonight as well, and it is Bank Holiday Monday, so hopefully people have been enjoying themselves and are now tired and worn out and are fed up of listening to the crazy hairy guy on the internet, and they're thinking more about getting ready to go to bed and have a nice extra long lie-in before they have to get up to go to work. Maybe. I don't know. I'm just trying to speculate in a way that would be a bit more upbeat rather than the usual speculating about the end of the world shit. I can't remember why we ended up talking about ancient agriculture now. Is it large civilizations?
6,000 years. They want to keep the history potted.
Yeah, that was it. Potted history. It's a good way of putting it. Yeah. The winners write history, so if they convince you that there were no winners before they started, before they took the crown, then that's when real history begins, according to them. Anything else beyond that can't be real. It's like the original attitude about paganism. Yeah, anything outside of our prescribed style of Christianity, we'll just call it paganism. Doesn't matter what it is. If it doesn't conform to one of the already known big religions, then it's just paganism. Everybody gets the same brush.
There's a bit of history I was trying to refer to. It was when people were doing agriculture and trading as well, because that is more in people's nature than to attack. But also mentioned overpopulation. So you can imagine these mongoloid Caucasian guys with their horses, and mostly they're living on hunting. And it's when the game starts to run out that they have to start attacking other people for food. Because violence is like that is not in the nature of most people, I don't think. Because even if you go and attack some farms and steal enough food and land, and now you can become the farmer, you're going to want the quiet life after a little while.
I don't think it's totally outside of the nature of some people. I think it gets into a problematic area whenever you try to ascribe any actions as being the nature of people, because people have a massive spectrum of attitudes and the kind of shit that they'll do. And there is also example from the rest of the natural world that there are some animals who will exploit others to enable their own existence. So, a simple one would be the cuckoo. The cuckoo doesn't raise its own children. It abuses, it exploits other birds to do that job for them. So that would be the equivalent of a psychopathic personality electing themselves leader of a community, and anyone who disagrees gets kicked out the nest. There is examples of the kind of attitudes throughout the natural world that some people still will express. I agree with you that most people in general are not violent. They don't want conflict. They don't want to have to fight each other for resources. If the resources were there available, they wouldn't fight each other. You know, if abundance was there, they wouldn't choose to fight each other.
I can't remember the name of it. Those people that think that everything in nature is been put there as a lesson from God. Well, the cuckoo is a lesson about ego and identity. Yeah, because most birds don't care about the identity. You know, so it's the old game player theory, isn't it? Yeah. No, if you fuck up other people, but most of them are good, you'll get away with it for a while. Well, the cuckoo does that because it recognises its own identity as special. But most birds just, treat everybody equally. So yeah, it's a lesson there for sure. Yeah? Even if it wasn't deliberate.
I think
Also,
probably.
Yeah, go on.
I was just thinking there's probably others as well that I can't think of off the top of my head.
Well, I remember mentioning the step from reptiles to mammals to man was about counting, wasn't it? Because the reptile's on his own, and then he's a mammal, which is a monkey, a part of a group. But then, to reproduce, he has to recognise his own individuality, and he has to select a female that he's not related to, in theory. And so these are the steps of evolutionary consciousness as well. Yeah, the sort of basic wiring.
And it matches well with the development of the brain as well.
Yeah.
From the lizard to the mammalian and then to the frontal cortex, frontal lobe.
Yeah.
Right, well, we have ranted and rambled. I've done most of the ranting. And we've rambled a bit. Hey, Jeff, I didn't see you in the chat room there, mate. Supreme Lord Commander, hello. Power walling with no need of membership. Okay. I'll have a quick scroll. I'll try scrolling upwards this time, see if it works better. Apple Charlotte, hello. Apple Charlotte. And Collyman, hello. Sorry for shouting at you early, man. I know what I feel I know what you were trying to say, but, sometimes you just got to turn around and go, ain't nobody got time for that shit. And Lobsam Tutro, I think I said hello to you earlier, didn't I? Yes, mate. I hope you're all right. You're always regular listener. Thank you for tuning in, mate. And Dotty, hello. I hope you're well, mate. Dotty, the artist formerly known as the non-violent extremist. Sorry, I'm having to squint a bit to read this text on the screen the other side of the room. Paula B, hello. And Gas Mask, hello. And Mascara Snake, hello. Scrolling up for a change. Mr. White Tube. Is it Mr. White Tuber? Hello, Mr. White Tuber. Is it an edible tuber? And Blazing Stars, hello. I think I've said hello to everyone.
Quick word of congratulations to Harry and Meghan on the birth of a baby.
What day was it? What day did it come out?
It was supposed to be a day after Beltane, but it might have been on Beltane itself. On the ancient calendar.
I missed that news. I knew that she'd was going into the hospital, but I missed the actual announcement of the birth, which I'm glad to say I missed it. I was too busy enjoying the sunshine out in the garden. I spent a fair amount of time sat in the garden watching the birds.
This is the whole reason for Tommy Robinson, yes? And so Harry could marry a black girl. Yeah? In England, yeah? If he'd done that.
That's a whole new conspiracy theory you just created. I think I said hello to everyone I could see in the chat room. I apologise if I have missed you out. I've been scrolling through and I'm squinting, so just blame me if I've missed you and I've not seen your name there. But thank you for joining in. Thanks for giving us your attention for like 90 minutes or so. hopefully we'll make it on Wednesday night on the Reality Chat channel. We'll do the reality chat as we do, talking about news, events, current affairs, as well as, like we do here, having a chat a little bit about the esoteric or other elements of things going on in the world. But most of it, we look at the news and see what's going on out there in the news media. As far as I know, Steve will be on Saturday, Steve to Goose. I'm sorry I missed the last broadcast, mate. I couldn't get internet going in any good way to sit and watch a whole podcast or a whole broadcast. But I will catch up with it as and when I can. But he's usually on a Saturday night, the mystery show on Steve to Goose channel. Please check out Jeff C on his Supreme Lord Commander channel. He does a lot of primarily content to do with the stuff that is trending or popular in entertainment media and YouTube media. So he looks at a lot of the popular people and the kind of stuff they get up to and the way the media is used, certainly in this kind of environment, but media in general, so movies, you know, TV, stuff like that. And check out his other channels, Just See Censored, where you'll find a lot more of the more in-depth videos. We're digging a bit behind all that kind of trending bullshit and looking at the bigger picture of things that are going on. And he's often talking about things similar to ourselves. We're talking about this kind of stuff. And I know there's lots of other great people out there and good broadcasts that you can tune into. So please, you know, don't think it's over yet. The fat lady hasn't finished singing yet. She's getting up into the heights of the aria at the moment, and those fences are being drawn in, but she's still not quite fat enough to push us all out of the exit doors yet. It'll happen soon enough, and we'll worry about it when it does happen. But until then, don't think there is no genuine response or discussion about a lot of this shit that's going on. There's a lot of great people out there talking about all this stuff. So please keep looking, keep thinking, keep talking, keep participating. And I don't mean that in the sense of giving money or joining clubs, just making use of your own energy, your own brain, your own self, and not believing the bullshit. I'll shut up now before I start waffling too much. Thanks again, folks. Take care. I'll catch you again soon. Catch yous.